take Siri and you could take IBM's Watson and put them together.
Are you proposing a new business? Are you leaving the new business to startup? We have a new startup here in Philadelphia.
I think of that. I mean, but seriously, that is what you're talking about. You have this supercomputer that knows how to win on Jeopardy most of the time. And you have Siri, which is talking to you all the time, and it's telling you, hey, maybe you don't want to have that large hamburger for dinner.
Right. And again, ultimately people have to make their own choices, but giving them tools to better understand options, giving them tools to better track options, giving them tools to better make them better understand different outcomes, whether positive or negative, will over time, I think, help transform healthcare and get people more focused on the healthy stuff. But there are many different companies doing many different things in that space. I think that is terrific. And I think it is one of the benefits of saying we need to disrupt or reinvent healthcare is it does lead to a lot of innovation around a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of investment. We're seeing really hundreds of startups that focused on different things that wouldn't have started 5 years ago because the sense is this is a big new opportunity. And there's a whole number of incubators and accelerators in a variety of cities around the country that are trying to create the next generation of these kind of health and wellness companies. I think it's very exciting, and many of them will fail, but some of them will be successful, and some of them could end up being really transformative.
Let me talk about social networking. First, real quick, did the social networks now, you have Google+, you have Facebook, you have Twitter, and a variety of others, Instagram. Did they kind of steal your idea? Because if people that that had AOL, they had instant messenger, they had chat room, and I see a lot of these things taking place in a lot of these social networks now.
I wouldn't say they stole it. I think they might have built on our ideas, but they clearly moved forward in different ways. With AOL, when we started in 1985, our bet was that someday everybody would be connected. That was part of it. We need to make it really easy and useful and fun and affordable to get everybody connected. That was part of it. But the other was that we really believed the killer app was community. It's now called social media. We used to call it community. It's people interacting with each other. We always believed that was the key. It always was the majority of our use, whether it be instant messaging or chat rooms or bulletin board. We always thought that was the key driver and also almost the soul of the media. It's what really kind of brought it to life and gave it a certain humanity. So we always believed that was the key. We thought content was important. We thought commerce was important. There are a lot of things we thought were important, but the main event for us was community. So that was the bet. When we were competing, particularly in the early 1990s, with companies like CompuServe, their bet was more on content. There are many companies that were focused on commerce, like Prodigy, IBM, CBS, Sears joint venture was focused more on commerce. Our bet was on community. That's really one of the reasons we kind of broke out of the PACT. So I think what we did 20 years ago helped kind of get things going and obviously helped position AOL for at least for a while as the leader. And then a new wave of companies, which is the way it's supposed to happen, have entered the space building on some of those ideas. And it's great to see Mark Zuckerberg, when I first met him, just now 5 years ago or something. Two things that I remember about it. One was I was looking at him and realized he wasn't even born when I got started in this business. It made me feel a little old.
Was he wearing a hoodie?
I think he probably was. And the second thing was he said, I just said to me, blah, blah, blah. I just want to let you know, it's kind of like a little bit of an apology, I think. But I learned programming by hacking into the AOL system, particularly the instant messaging system. We actually had a bunch of really smart hackers. He apparently was one of them. He was quite proud of the fact he was like 11 or 12 years old. He was like bringing us to our knees. But we're happy we helped give him the skill set that led to Facebook. And we're glad that he got that off his chest.
Let's talk about Facebook. Among the other social networks, Facebook went public. And everyone knows what happened with the IPO and the stock price being much lower right now. And it seems like they have trouble making money when it comes to mobile, and that's where all the growth is. And it's because you have phones, most people do, that they're small compared to your desktop. So it's hard to see the ads. For an investor's perspective, can you make money on mobile with social networking, and what are they doing right or wrong right now?
No, I think you can, and I think they're on that trajectory. I have, I guess, a little bit different take. I completely agree with the case that said that the late stage private market was a little broken, and people making late stage, just part of the IPO investments that a company like Facebook, in retrospect, were paying prices that were too high, number one. And number two, when they did go public, they did price it a little more aggressively than they should have. And the expectation was going to go up, and it went down, led to a lot of disappointment, and sort of a negative feeling around things. I look at it a little differently, even though I think those were problems. The part of the Jobs Act they talked about, this on-ramps for IPOs, was designed to give companies a path to go public a little sooner, which there's a lot of reasons why that's a benefit. My take is 8 years ago, Mark Zuckerberg started his company in a dorm. 8 years later, it's got 1 billion users, and it's worth $40 billion. And it was at one point worth $80 billion, and 80 is better than 40. But $40 billion when it didn't exist 8 years ago for a company that basically serves 1 billion users, I think that's pretty cool. I think that's a great success. The only reason it's negative is because the valuation got a little bit out of whack. But looking at the trajectory of the company, I'll invest in any company you can have that, 8 years later, you're worth $40 billion. That'd be awesome. So I think it was a huge success story, one of the great success stories of the last decade. It just got the IPO process, it didn't quite work the way, obviously, they anticipated. That shouldn't kind of discount the basic trajectory of that company, which has been, awesome.
How many friends do you have?
I have a bunch of friends. I actually use Twitter now more than Facebook because I think I made the mistake a few years ago probably not 5 years ago, that when I started using Facebook actively, that basically I said, I think they have a 5,000
They do
for
personal,
which I hit like 4 years ago. And my theory of the case was if I have, I think it was 100 mutual friends, I'd accept you. But actually, most of the people on the Facebook I actually don't know. And so it's not quite the way it was intended. So I use Twitter more now. I think it works better for me. But I think both are tremendous success stories.
I'm on both, but I totally agree with you, and I tell people this all the time. Facebook is a coffee shop. Twitter is a news feed. And it forces you to be brief.
Right.
Because of the amount of characters that you can use. Let's talk about the internet. It's the Wild West still. Anything goes. It's relatively unorganized. Tell me if you disagree with any of these comments. And you have SOPA, which I'm sure all of you know was an effort to try and control things and protect brands like Disney, for instance, who owns my company. Do you foresee less democratic, more controlled, and more money-making machine for government and for business in the future for the internet?
Well, I think it will continue to evolve. I actually think the government got this pretty right over the last 50 years. Just look at this, kind of the story of the internet. 50 years ago, the basic research the government funded, federal government funded, DARPA, basically created the internet. It wouldn't have existed without that. There were some defense reasons in terms of redundant systems that couldn't break down if there was a nuclear war. I mean, a bunch of defense reasons, kind of security reasons to drive it. But essentially, they put the investment in to make the core technologies workable. And then after a while, they decided to commercialize that and make it available not just for government use, but more commercial use. That happened, by the way, not until 1991. When we got started at AOL in 1985, it was illegal for us to connect AOL to the internet. They really were kind of separate worlds. It sort of feels amazing to see how quickly that's developed. But they basically, once they commercialized it, they basically, for most of the past couple decades, it had kind of a hands-off, let the market figure it out kind of role. As it gets to be more of a force and starts impacting e-commerce or there are issues implicated around privacy, particularly for kids or other kinds of things, then it's going to get more attention, and figuring out what the right policy should be on each of these things is tricky. And that's really now it's sort of shifted to more of that debate and saying, hands off, anything goes, doesn't seem as appropriate now that it is so well developed and so important, and there are some legitimate concerns. So the question is, what do you do next? The whole issue with SOPA and PIPA were two laws about a year ago that basically Hollywood was pushing for content owners and Silicon Valley, as you will, it's not really Silicon Valley because it's really the technology industry, was basically arguing it was too onerous, and they won that battle. Basically, those laws are now basically dead. And in that particular instance, the sense was that what what was being proposed was just a little too onerous in terms of stifling innovation. So it's always a balancing act, but it's not surprising that after kind of being birthed and grown up, at some point you say we put some kind of rules in the road. The challenge is to make sure they're reasonable rules that don't end up stifling the next wave of innovation. Particularly given the internet obviously is a global phenomenon, and what we do in our country, is one thing, but what happens globally is quite another.
Amazon.com started collecting sales taxes a few months ago, really.
Right.
Is that just the beginning in terms of more taxation on the internet?
Yeah, probably. The exclusion I fought hard for 15, 20 years ago to basically make sure e-commerce companies had the ability to be successful, and there was not a tax there. I think it made a lot of sense as it becomes a bigger phenomenon, and it's not. Government's you can debate how much government there should be, and you can debate what the relative levels of taxes should be, but one way or another, there's going to be some collection of sales tax on some transactions, and figuring out how to over time make sure they're kind of consistent policies. Makes sense. So this is part of the evolution, and I think folks in the technology world, particularly the internet world, just need to recognize that as it gets to a certain scale, has a certain impact on things, it's going to get more scrutiny, and the challenge is to engage and try to make sure people are making some of these decisions understand the pluses and minuses of various alternatives, and tries to get to a kind of a reasonable approach.
Revolution is invested in zip code,
Right.
which is where you can literally, you're a member, you just go outside and there's a car waiting for you, and you use it, and then it tells you when you can't use it anymore, and you leave it there, and someone else goes and gets it. Talk about the future of transportation in terms of how we use cars. I mean, is there going to be one day where no one has a garage anymore because there's fully no use in keeping a car? And what do you think about the push to get electric vehicles out there? Is that something that just isn't going to work given the cost of the battery, and how really it isn't green because you need to charge a battery and that isn't clean?
Well, I can't say I'm an expert in it, but I think hybrids, electric, and other kinds of technologies are becoming more popular. Prices are coming down. I think they are legitimate markets, and over time will have more market share. I do think in cities like in Philadelphia, for most people, particularly if they live and work in the city, it's kind of stupid to own a car. On average, people spend $1,000 a month. Use it less than 5% of the time. It's usually in a garage 23 hours a day. You just want to have it there in case you need it. And if there's another way to provide that instant, convenient access more affordably, more greener kind of way, that's going to get increasing levels of traction. And we're seeing that with Zipcar and other companies doing different things around car sharing and other sorts of things. I think it's great to see. And more broadly, we were seeing in the last decade, particularly the last 5 years, the emergence of what we call the sharing economy. This is a generational thing. I think some people call it the millennial generation really is more focused on use and experience than they are ownership. And that's true with cars, but it's true with other assets. Well, we're also involved in a company called Swiss Resorts that a lot of people share vacation homes, things like that. So there's this idea of sharing instead of owning, when you can get almost all the benefits of ownership without all the cost and hassle. We think there's a big driver, and that's only possible across all these different businesses because of the internet. What makes Zipcar possible is particularly mobile letters. I can pull out my phone and find a car that probably is a block away, book it, walk up to it, push a button, open the card opens, I go inside, you can drive away, and then return it. I can want for an hour or 3 hours, what have you. I can do it all, book it remotely, access it conveniently. And that's what makes it possible. It didn't make sense 20 years ago when the internet was not ubiquitous, and particularly you didn't have the internet in your pocket. So there are all kinds of different companies that are now being created based on that infrastructure being in place.
Your wife, Jean, who is here as well, and you joined the Giving Pledge.
Right.
And this is the pledge that was started by Warren Buffett and Bill Gates, and pledged to give the majority of your wealth away. Some people may think it's crazy, other people think it's great. Why did you do it?
Well, we thought it was a good idea. We actually planned to give away the majority of our wealth anyway, so in that sense, it wasn't like we woke up one day and said, "Oh, maybe we should give away some of our wealth." We were planning. We started the Case Foundation 15 years ago, and we have done a number of things over the last 15 years. For us, the two things that drove it, there was some anxiety, to be honest, because it seemed like a public thing, and we were kind of more private, philanthropy kind of things. But the two things that ultimately led us to decide to join it, we were glad we did, was number one, we believe that, we know, we've done it the hard way, giving away money responsibly is hard, much harder than you think. And the ability to get people and have them share their experiences, what they did right, more importantly, what they did wrong, with other 7,500 people, we believe would make everybody's giving more impactful, more efficient, smarter. And so getting, the ability to gather these folks together and share ideas, and we've had a number of different gatherings to do that, I think has been really helpful. I think everybody is a little bit smarter, a little bit wiser, which means those dollars will go a little bit, maybe a lot further in terms of solving problems, which is what drives people to do it in the first place. So that was great. The second was, although it was a way, obviously, wealthy people were doing this, one of the key areas of focus for the Case Foundation is what we call democratizing giving. And there's a lot of things on the Case Foundation site that are designed to do. We've made investments in a lot of companies' causes, and Network for Good, Mission Fish, and others that try to kind of instill this idea where it really isn't just much less what a small number of people do. It's what everybody can do, and you can try to shine a spotlight on everybody kind of participating, at least virtually, in the idea of giving something, either giving time or giving money. So it also, we felt, was a way to kind of shine a spotlight on that. But the idea of learning from each other has been important. One area that's been a real focus, and we have had a lot of discussions, and we actually, based on that, decided to launch an initiative, the Case Foundation focused on that, is the whole area of impact investing, which is sort of this hybrid between kind of for-profit businesses and not-for-profit. Some people call it double bottom lines, some people call it social enterprise, some people call it B Corps. There are a variety of different social impact bonds in the UK. There are a variety of different things that are being experimented with. We think it's actually a really fertile area of it. Deserves some focus. It's complicated. There's some issues. There's some controversies. Some people like it. Some people don't like it. But it just feels like something that justifies some more time. And so it's an area of focus. And some of that came out of some of the discussions we had with the agriculture.
And there's no race to give it all first between you and Buffett and Gates, right?
And I would not try to compete in that battle. They won that before the got fired.
I have 5,000 questions for Steve, but I want to give the audience an opportunity to ask some questions as well. I just have one more, and I hope you don't mind me getting a bit philosophical here, but what's your greatest fear? And this could be something with your own community, with our country, with this planet itself, with the international governments. What do you fear the most these days?
Well, there's a bunch of things to worry about. The one I particularly focus on is making sure, it goes back to what we said at the beginning, making sure we do everything we can to remain the world's most entrepreneurial nation. I think it's a really big deal. I think people don't understand how important it is. As I said, the story of America is the story of patriots and what happened in Liberty Bell and all the rest of the stuff. Obviously Philadelphia being a key part of that story. It's awesome. But the story also are these entrepreneurs who built these companies and built these industries and built these regions. If you look at the story of every major region, Detroit was Silicon Valley 50 years ago. When the automobile was a big innovation, that was like the center of economic vitality. That's true with regions all around the nation, and that's really what led us to our prominence as a nation, our influence as a nation, our success as a nation. And so making sure that we don't get complacent about that's really important. The reason it's important is other nations have figured this out. They figured out that the secret sauce that's driven the American economy is entrepreneurship. And they're moving very aggressively to put pro-entrepreneurship policy in place. Capital incentives, make it really easy for people to move there in terms of immigration immigration policy, basic research. They're really pushing in a variety of different countries, and as some of these countries kind of rise, it's going to create more and more competition for us, and we need to move aggressively right now to protect that and build on it. Right now, we are the world's most entrepreneurial nation, but it's not like something we can take for granted. And one example that is a little chilling, I think, is we go back to Facebook. The lead investor in Facebook was the venture firm Accel Partners. 10 years ago, Accel had all their venture investors in Silicon Valley. Now they have more venture investors in China than they do in Silicon Valley, 10 years later. That kind of bothers me. And the reason they're doing that is smart for them, it's smart for their LP, and quarrel with that, is because they believe that's where the opportunity, the capital finds these opportunities. So we really need to make sure we remain the most entrepreneurial nation, and we saw this a lot, particularly in Pennsylvania, obviously, this battle over manufacturing, and we've lost the manufacturing sector. We're fighting against them back, particularly around advanced manufacturing and so forth. But people say, oh, we were asleep at the wheel 20, 30 years ago, and when that was the lead, now we're kind of lost some of that lead. Well, we have got the lead in entrepreneurship, and I'd hate 20 or 30 years from now for us to be like, what happened? Like, what were we asleep at the wheel? Why didn't we recognize that this was the core to driving our economy, to driving job growth, ensuring competitiveness, and why didn't we do the things that we needed to do, such as things around high-skilled immigration, but there are other things as well to make sure that we can continue to be the magnet for the best and brightest entrepreneurs and engineers, and really the source of the great innovation for the next internet